Signs of the Southland, a busy weekend in the city of Atlanta. Miami versus Atlanta United, the Green Bay Packers versus the Atlanta Falcons, Common Decency versus Music Midtown. Really? I mean, let me be clear.
People who yell
Actually,
about soccer versus the U.S. Soccer Foundation or Federation or whatever the F stands for.
And now we can move on to talking about Georgia Tech cross country. Let's start with the site of NCAA regionals this year in Gainesville, Florida, which played host to the Mountain Dew Invitational, which is ironic that a soft drink manufacturer is sponsoring an athletic event. The men of Georgia Tech placed second behind North Florida and ahead of Florida, Vanderbilt, and South Florida, among other competitors. Zach Yeager placed third overall with a time of 24 minutes and 11 seconds. John Higginbotham at fourth and Devin Wade at sixth overall, all under the 24 and a half minute mark. The women placed third behind Florida and Vanderbilt, but ahead of South Florida and FAU. Grace Driscoll, the top finisher for Georgia Tech, at third overall, 17 minutes, 12 seconds, and Katie Earwood at eighth overall, 17 minutes and 31 seconds. Mr. Grant, you have in here that you have a mini rant for us.
Yeah. One thing that it just not too tough, but just post the link to the final scores. That would make my life wildly easier in researching this stuff. But that said, PT Timing is a beautiful site, and that's what Florida was using for their race. So it was very easy to find all of the various stats and scores and things like that. Of note, one, you'd think that they would have Gatorade sponsor the Gainesville cross country invite. Don't know about that, PepsiCo, but not my business, I guess. Moving on, I do want to kind of highlight, it may seem a little bit weird that it's like, oh yeah, North Florida, why did we lose to them? Low key, they're a pretty good program. Not like world beaters or anything like that, but certainly one that's it kind of, at least to me, the first time I saw us lose to them in something in cross country or track, I was like, that's a little weird, but certainly a program to keep an eye on. I thought it was kind of heartening to see, other than Zach Yeager, a handful of names that we may not see as much. Yeager and Grace Driscoll on the women's side both placed third overall. John Higginbotham fourth for the men, Devin Wade sixth for the men, and Katie Earwood eighth for the women. I also thought it was pretty unusual to see the men finish a little bit higher up than the women. So, if that means that we can get maybe into that wide middle part, the cul-de-sac, if you will, of the ACC, it exists in all sports. That'd be a nice step up, particularly for the men who have been kind of in that third tier of the ACC for a minute. So just getting back up to the meat of the middle would be very nice.
And half of those teams that we were running were Power 5 teams, so it wasn't like we were racing nobody as well in North Florida. So it wasn't like we were racing nobody. And I know for John specifically, like I'm friends with his family, and he's definitely making improvements, and he's really liked where he's been. So good for the Higginbothams. Also, hi everybody that I know that is related to John.
Jack, remind me of a question for you off air regarding English professors at Georgia Tech, but
I know exactly where this is going.
Okay, cool. I had no idea, but that's good confirmation. So
yes,
shout out. 1102 was a great class. No regrets there.
You can catch Georgia Tech cross country back in action closer to home this time in Fairburn, Georgia for the Alexander Asics Invitational on the 30th of September. Mr. Purdy, take us through yesterday's session of sporting adventure in Oxford, Mississippi.
Oxford, Mississippi was the site of Tech's third game of the year, in football specifically. We played Ole Miss, the second leg of the home and home with them. We lost to them last year in an infamous game that bears no repeating. This year, still lost 48-23. Of note, we were only down 10-3 at a half, which I think we said in our Slack was like, okay, we will take this all day if we can be down one score to Ole Miss on the road at night. Like, that's a great that for knowing where we were and where we're trying to get to, that is a great spot to be in. Granted, but and both teams like had missed some fourth and goals, so like the variability of where the score could have been also was a lot. So it kind of neutralized itself, thankfully, at that point in the game. We had a kick blocked, and we blocked. We Georgia Tech blocked a kick of our own, like so insane that we actually did that. And then we were within one score in the fourth quarter, down 24-17. The offense has kind of started to figure things out in that second half. We were rolling on with really long drives, Jake. I mean, Jake was watching on here too, like really long, rushing, dominant drives. We were milking a lot. Like we only had the ball 3 times in the first half. Like we were milking all sorts of clock in that first half.
Well, Haynes finally connected on a deep ball to Singleton in there too, which they had taken a couple of shots, and I don't know. I think the offense acquitted themselves reasonably well. Absolutely. I mean, there was only two short drives. They didn't turn the ball over at all. A couple of passes where I was like, but I mean, it's college. Haynes King's a first year full-time
exactly.
starter.
Yeah. This is the 3rd game of his starting career ever, and the first game he's played against a ranked team as the full-time starting quarterback, and it was on the road. So like the conditions were not in his favor at all. Ole Miss's defense was not exactly like the greatest of all time either. So he had room to work, and he worked. Like Singleton caught some huge catches.
I think the game became a little cursed when the folks I was watching the game with started saying, wow, our offense is exactly 17 points better than it was last year. And their offense, or our defense, is 18 points worse. And that's when the football god smiled down and said, that's not how this works. And then the game it was pretty weird in the first half. Don't get me wrong.
It was
10-3, couple block kicks. We gave them the short field a number of times.
We did. The fact that we only allowed 10, considering they had short field twice, was incredible. Mm-hmm. Like that defense was at the end of the game was not that good to prevent that kind of thing. The fact we were allowing touchdowns by their backups, and they already were basically playing half backups the entire game anyways on offense. So,
I mean, and this was I'm borrowing a take here that I got from discussing this game with a couple friends over text. And you guys can correct me if you disagree with this take. Tech got aggressive when they were down, and Tech has been conservative with the lead. And I think that very much came out tonight. Obviously, I know I think the From the Rumble Seat Slack, if it was a physical object, would have caught on fire after that fake punt.
The fake punt was
type scenario.
The fake punt was something.
I'm not convinced. I mean, I haven't done a rewatch.
Also, we should have gotten a first down. Actually, I know you weren't watching, but like Ole Miss aggressively held our tight end. We sent out to the flat to catch the first down pass, and like there was a full jersey tug and everything, and they just didn't even act like anything had ever happened.
A lot of those penalty yards for Ole Miss came after the game was getting a little out of hand too. But anyways, I haven't done a rewatch on that. I'm not convinced that I disagree with that call, but that's a hallmark of a team that's playing aggressive, trying to stay in the game, trying to win. That's good, but it's also, I think, a contributor to why the score kind of went cuckoo bananas there in the end.
If you're going to play football that aggressively, there are going to be games where it just truly does not pan out whatsoever. And it's early stretch of the game, and it's more likely to happen when you're playing a team who can capitalize on your mistakes as well. And that's what Ole Miss is.
And they did for the most part. I mean, we stopped them on the goal line once, but giving them short fields, the depth question, I have this in the themes bucket, not the game flow bucket. But I mean, we had a fair amount of at least injuries or play stoppages due to injury.
Yeah,
depth becomes a question, and it's already kind of been a question too. And the fact that we're kind of like, it feels like Ole Miss's AAA team based on all the familiar faces that we saw.
Missing a couple. Yeah, they were missing a couple wide receivers, and every single person we sent to their defense like made real plays also, and like kind of quashed a running game at particular times, or were batting down balls. Like Akilo Stone made a difference, Amari Walden made a difference. Truly, the Georgia Tech 2022 team was out in full force for the Ole Miss Rebels last night.
Yeah, it's Akshay just typed the KC Athletics to the New York Yankees pipeline. Very true for those who know baseball history. But all that said, I walk away from it feeling weird because unlike a game we'll talk about in a minute from this weekend, I wasn't necessarily mad or upset. I think some of the other results from around the country, cough, cough, Newport News, looking at you, Wake Forest, have made me think, hey, like maybe there's a couple winnable games. And to be fair, most people had this game kind of circled as like, we might struggle here opportunity. And I think it kind of reflected at least those incoming notes that we had, right?
Yeah.
We're a little bit outmanned. We had to have a couple things go our way. And in general, they didn't, right? Plus a couple odd plays go in their direction. And that's ball game right there.
Yeah. No, I think we were down 24-17 early in the fourth quarter and the game ended being 48-23. Like that's an insane amount of garbage, like just weird stuff that happened really, really quickly at the end of that game. So I know there was a lot of folks that were like, no consolation. Like this is not a consolation when we got to start winning or what else. Like, no, this is year one of truly finding what this program and reestablishing what this program will be. And there's going to be some just sucky losses in the meantime, but it doesn't mean that throughout the course of 3.5 quarters, you can't play like a team that is uber competitive and a few random things away from being actually leading that game. And our defensive depth absolutely showed how not depth it is. Like it got exposed really quickly at the end of that game and it could not hold. It just didn't hold up the entire game. And that's, I think, a huge thing here is like, it may not be a thing Thacker can exactly solve this year, just knowing like what kind of talent we have and the talent we lost that we literally saw on the other team when we had the ball. So that was just a weird. I get your weird part. Like it's a weird dynamic of seeing. Okay, we are getting better. At the same time, the things that kept us from getting even better were literally playing against us physically. They were physically on the other side of the ball, attempting to make us lose. So that was an absolutely weird dynamic. But I think all in all, I think Jake, you'll agree. Like this was without a doubt progress that we needed to see. We knew losing by 42 again could not happen again. It did not happen again. We had covered the spread with our last garbage time touchdown, and then Ole Miss put their third string running back out there and got one last touchdown with like a minute to go. I don't know. Brent Key said he did not feel like that was running up the score at all. So I don't think there's no bad blood there between him and Lane in that.
Perhaps Lane has not forgiven us for the Sun Bowl. I don't know.
Who knows? Maybe. It's something. I mean, I don't. That game was over in the end anyway. So like, I don't think it really should matter what really would happen there. I do want to know Jackson Dart, Ole Miss's quarterback. He was actually pretty fun to watch. Like I liked his watching his running game, and he was able to throw some good passes. It's just as a guy that appreciates good football,
I don't know. I don't know.
Also,
I just got no love for the other team, Jack.
A quarterback named Dart. A quarterback named Dart. That's a great football name. Great football name.
I think a couple other themes just circling back on that are important, and I do want to reiterate: Tech limited turnovers.
They did,
but they didn't force any.
No, we got a sack.
Held the ball for a long time.
We got a sack finally.
But you've got a sack, got a couple tackles for loss. Those are good things. Yeah. Need more of them, but hey, maybe it's proof. A start of something. Tech held the ball a long time. They managed clock. They gained yards, almost 500. That's a fairly
the yardage by the end was like within 100 yards of each other which is such a weird thing to see for a game that was so disparately gone by the end of the game as well.
But they let up almost 600 yards, and that's you just cannot win ball games doing that. Like at the end of the day, it's like that's just that. I don't know.
Yeah. No, I agree. It's overall, you say having the notes here, Haynes King, massive upgrade over Jeff Sims. Lots of you can just watch the Nebraska games and our games and see how that is absolutely the case. So that's where we are. I think
Singleton's looking good too.
Singleton's really fun to watch, catch the ball, absolutely. And overall,
Cooley's looking good. I mean, I think the offense is
there. Aiden Burr is showing he can be the kicker as well. So the guy, wait, Jake, do we have to press pause in the Gavin Stewart fan club?
I think we do. And I think we also need to ask, this seemed to be a pretty universal thing. I thought it was just me noticing this, but, talking to people in 12 different watching situations, what happened on that block kick? It looked like everyone heard a whistle or looked around or
I'm not sure. I mean,
did
I was
something.
just getting home from the United game when that happened, so I wasn't able to identify really what happened there.
It was weird. Like, I thought the play was stopped and then it kept going and they wound up with the ball on our 33-yard line.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So it
also,
was weird.
Interesting. Also, note David Shanahan got hurt during the game, so we are on backup punter situation right now. Potentially, not sure. I don't think we've
during the same play. But he was making punts. He was out there. I think that's probably one of the reasons why they went for it on a fake. He wasn't getting the distance and the oomph.
Because I get into they had a replacement come out for his final punt of the game.
Yeah,
whose name I'm forgetting. We play next this coming Saturday at Wake Forest at 6:30. That game is on the CW, everybody. That is not on ACC Network, ESPN, ABC, CBS, NBC, Fox Sports, nothing. That is your local whatever channel. I don't even know where to get this.
CW 69 in Atlanta.
Nice.
There you go. That's where you'll find it. 6:30 p.m.
Couple notes from me. One on the CW and that part of the ACC TV deal. Clearly, everyone realized that putting these games on an RSN, given the lack of RSN access on streamers, was never going to work.
Bally
so I have to give.
Couldn't do it on Bally.
I have to give some credit to the powers that be to get themselves out of that jam, especially with the collapse of the RSN model in other parts of the country. But also points taken away for the fact that we still have football games on not ESPN networks. And I think that is kind of an embarrassing part of the TV deal that the ACC has going still, because those are the ghost of Raycom games, if there ever were any. The other couple notes, Jake, go for it before I finish.
Wake looked pretty bad before squeaking out with a win. So just putting that on everyone's radar. Just putting that out there.
Good point.
Couple other
Not
notes.
Nearly as spooky of a road environment as well.
So the other thing that I wanted to comment on, or I guess, Jake, you'd mentioned this on our shot sheet, is that Ole Miss did not file a particularly accurate injury report. They apparently had two healthy running backs that were both listed on an injury report. And the thing that comes to mind for me is that these reports aren't, if I remember correctly, the SEC still isn't mandating these be released. And the accuracy of them isn't enforced by any sort of competitive body. But given the rise of sports betting in the United States, and the Big Ten's lead on releasing standardized injury reports this season, I think that you'll see a lot more conferences invest in that. Even beyond the betting part of this and the betting motivation of it, it's just dumb to not release an injury report the day before your game, even for professional sports franchises. But we will not touch that part with a 10-foot pole. The other part of this game, I have a bone to pick with ESPN. As someone that builds software off of ESPN data, they don't have play-by-play for this game anymore. It was live during the game, and it was pulled immediately after. So if you go on GameOnPaper.com, which we love to cite for advanced stats, there's no play-by-play for this game, which was carried on an ESPN network. There's no play-by-play for the Louisville game either, which was also carried on an ESPN network. And it's frankly extremely frustrating, if not like borderline disrespectful.
It is still out there. Check it out.
It's not
out there. Yeah.
Yeah. That this kind of accurate data isn't provided. Obviously, caveats, right? Like building software on top of existing like data sources that are not your own, problematic in certain ways. But even from a fan perspective, not being able to read through how the game happened, if you want to sort of identify a specific sequence of plays that maybe led to a turning point in the game, you're completely unable to do that right now.
Yeah.
And it's extremely frustrating. So that's my piece on that. I hope that some of these data issues get figured out and we can take a look in a little bit more detail at some of these moments in this game in particular. Um, let's move on. Let's talk about something closer to home for Mr. Grant. Georgia Tech golf was at the Fighting Illini Invitational at Olympia Fields Country Club near Chicago, Illinois. The final round of this, posted for today or yesterday, I believe, was canceled due to weather, but Christo Lamprecht placed first at 9 under par with a total stroke score of 131 strokes. The team overall placed third at 3 under par, rounding out the squad for this past weekend. Bartley Forrester at eighth, at 2 under. Freshman Fontenot, I'm not going to pronounce that right. Placed 30th at 3 over. Kramer, who I believe was a transfer, was placed 42nd at 5 over, and Kim, another freshman, was at 80th place, 17 over. Any thoughts on the golf performance this week?
First off, that's Fontenot. You don't pronounce the T. It's like former MLB infielder Mike Fontenot. Also of note, after 2 rounds, North Carolina was 10 shots in the lead. Texas was second. Not 10 shots in the lead, 10 shots under. Texas was in second, 4 under. Tech in third with 3 under. North Carolina is the number 1 team in the nation ranked this year. I think it's probably for pretty good reason from what I've seen so far, golf and statistic wise. So that's probably something to keep an eye on here this year.
It's weird to come out of a season in which Tech and North Carolina really battled it out and took it down to the wire in that NCAA semifinal, and then have both of these teams. There's like a significant amount of distance in the coaches poll between these two teams. So it's weird on that perspective. And also it's extremely weird to think about how soon or like how recent that NCAA championship round feels like, and that we're already playing golf again.
Golf is 12 months a year down here in the South, my friend.
Also the PGA started, the FedEx Cup stuff started again this past weekend too, despite East Lake only being 2 weeks ago.
East Lake was 2 weeks ago. They have a weird fall thing that's no one has quite liked yet, and I don't even understand it yet. And like no one that was relevant has to actually play in any of these events, so it's strange. It's basically the golf season still is not happening until Waste Management in Phoenix on Super Bowl Sunday. So don't worry about it. That was Christo's
second, intended.
I know that was Christo's second career victory. So he's a multi-time winner now, which is cool. And yeah, I mean, at least we're seeing them not have like, oh no, we suddenly had a massive drop. Like these guys didn't like have a summer drop off or anything like that. Like they are absolutely still playing at high levels. So for the guys that are going to be our main weapons come major tournament time. So that's still a long way away. So I mean, good to win now, but let's also keep in mind we got to win later.
I do want to follow up on my comment about the rankings from a little bit earlier. The preseason rankings were released on September 1st. North Carolina is top ranked, obviously, like Jake said, 444 total points. Tech is fourth with 384, total points, and no first place votes. So still a significant distance despite those two teams playing an extremely tight national semifinal. Florida is eighth in this, the actual national champion, with 5 first place votes, to be fair, but down at eighth. So a couple of interesting things to note there. You can next see golf on October 2nd and 3rd at the Ben Hogan Collegiate Invitational in Fort Worth, Texas. Considering that's a 2-day affair, I assume that's match play. I didn't see a note on it, but
maybe 2 rounds a day for one of those things. Maybe
Ben Hogan Collegiate Invitational. Oh, this might be a pro-am.
Oh, interesting.
Interesting. Something to monitor. I don't know. We'll be back to talk about women's tennis and Georgia Tech volleyball after this short break.
Yes. So as you've seen the last few weeks, we've talked about a number of new options from Section 103. I'm going to circle back on the Haynes King thing. Number 10, he's got his own Section 103 shirts. They're great. They're the same awesome materials that they use on all of their other wonderful products. I recommend checking that out. Haynes has been acquitted himself nicely as quarterback of the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets, and I believe proceeds from that do on some level support his name, image, and likeness efforts. So go check them out there. As always, free shipping on orders over $70 every day. You can find them at section103.com and at section103 on Twitter as well.
Welcome back to Scions of the Southland. Before we get into a interesting volleyball weekend, let's talk about the first set of the women's tennis schedule. They were at the Furman Fall Classic in South Carolina all weekend. Mr. Grant, do you want to hit up the double scores for me, please?
Yes, absolutely. Little short this weekend in the doubles department. Marsh and Sharabura did pair up to face both Tennessee and Ohio State, as well as Auburn. So 3 matches for them, but just one for Roach and Foster against Alabama. Marsh and Sharabura went 1-2. They lost 8-6 and 8-4, beating Ohio State 8-6. All 3 quality programs. And then Roach and Foster did play Alabama, and they won 8-4 there. Of course, Marsh and Sharabura, pretty familiar names, whereas Roach and Foster, new folks in terms of comparing to last year.
Ginger Foster, freshman, and Given Roach, also a freshman. Ginger Foster from Los Angeles, California, from the Laurel Springs High School, and Given Roach from Cheshunt, England, and Loughborough University. So, interesting recruiting strategy for Georgia Tech. Their singles was a little bit of a very interesting time for Georgia Tech. Couple of mixed results here and there. Tech played Ohio State, players from Ohio State, USC, Alabama, Georgia, Auburn, Furman, Tennessee. A lot mixed in here. There was no real structure to this tournament. I think it was just sort of a doubles tournament on one end, a singles tournament on another end. We saw some debuts for Jezudison, Mira Jezudison, who's a freshman from Beerwine, Pennsylvania, from the Leadership Charter High School up there, and also singles debuts for Given Roach and Ginger Foster as well. So a bit of a mixed bag. I'm not going to go through all of these scores. There's like 15 of them, but nothing like it's a early season tournament. I don't think there's a lot to take away. I don't know if either of you two have major thoughts on like that moving forward, but that's kind of where I'm at.
They played. Teams are getting reps in. It's ITA stuff. Like it's not serious yet. So
the fall tournaments are all a little weird. I don't think we need to overreact too badly to wins and losses, especially as it's kind of an interesting weekend just with the variety of names, faces, teams. Half the SEC was up there in Furman plus Ohio State. That's a pretty stacked lineup, and you're seeing a lot of different folks in a pretty high variety weekend.
One note, as I'm looking at the roster and the coaching staff, there's now a director of Olympic sports player development on staff, which is something for us to check in on, I think. And also there's a lot, I think we've spoken a lot about geographic diversity on some of these non-revenue sports squads. The tennis squad, I think, is a really good example. You have 2 from England, 1 from Mexico, 1 from India, 1 from the Northern Mariana Islands, 2 from Atlanta, and then 2 from the greater U.S. So that's just a massive amount of cultural melting pot in a single 10-person squad. So I think that's pretty impressive.
One of the most global sports. So you have, if you cast your net wide enough, you're going to find a lot of good players out there. So I don't fully blame the team for. We've done this for swimming, we've done this in women's basketball, we're doing it now in volleyball. Like it's to make better teams. Probably expanding your search pool should net you better players on average. So.
Also, did we know that the tennis head coaching positions were endowed by the Byers family? and had their names next to him too.
That's been news for a bit. That's, I think, right around the same time the Berg Marks became the swimming endowment.
I'm glad someone knew about this, and I'm just late on the draw.
I swear we did a podcast episode about this, but or a podcast segment about this, but that was years ago. So
this is the only place where it would get resurfaced. So
if we didn't do it, no one did, you know?
I agree with that. Speaking of the women's tennis team, they'll be back in action next weekend, or I think later this week, technically, September 21st through the 23rd at the College Ranked Spotlight in North Carolina. That'll be hosted by NC State. All right.
I think the guys get going this next week. I want to say, oh no, it's in 2 weekends. Never mind. I lied. Never mind. Next episode.
Ruining my segue. Gentlemen, let's talk about this week in volleyball, which starts with an emotionally crushing loss to our least favorite opponent. But maybe there's some bright spots in there. I don't know. We'll find out in the midst of this discussion. Let me get through the metadata of this first. There's a 3-1 loss at McCamish Pavilion to the Athenians. The attendance, if I remember correctly from your report, Jack, was 53,004. They sold 3,900 tickets before the game, and by the middle of the session, the crowd filled almost the entire lower bowl. Yep. The courtside student section was completely full. The basketball section with the band and everything filled in over time. Yep. I would say that the students that were not in the courtside section took more advantage of general admission seating rather than stuck to that section. So they made this Six Flags night. Why? Yes, that is also a note here. This was the same night as SCPC's Six Flags night. Usually, just for context, for those that didn't have Six Flags night or don't know what it is, SCPC, the Student Center Programs Council, hosts a night at Six Flags for Georgia Tech students and has buses that go from campus over to Six Flags. Basically, Six Flags is closed down for every other, paying individual. It's only for Georgia Tech students from 6 p.m. to midnight that night. And I assume it's a lot of fun. I was never into theme parks, so I didn't really go.
A couple times. It was a very affordable way to enjoy a night at Six Flags. And with the buses, it was very convenient, but definitely lost some potential involved folks who might go just based on the name.
I didn't know that was happening. Interesting. I mean, it was still, when I was walking up, it was still I walked up like an hour before the match, and there was still a noticeable number of folks walking up there. So it wasn't like we didn't, honestly, we got 5,300 people there. Like, it's not like no one showed.
Yeah, I mean, if you
it's
have
the biggest attendance they've ever had. I don't think we can really say like, what a disappointment. They beat last year's record by almost 2,000 people. Yeah, That's a big increase.
They almost nailed it. Like, they were a Six Flags night away from actually going over the 2,000 plus mark for last year's attendance.
Yeah. And I think, Jake, we were talking about this during the game too. They were very, very close to filling up the lower bowl. It was just basically like the only major hole was just at the very top of the basketball, like the bleacher student section. Yeah. If they had that, it would have been basically full the whole way around. And it's like objectively a very, very impressive display of support for this program, and they picked the right part of the schedule to do it at, and they picked the right opponent. We'll talk about the game, but they picked the right opponent because nothing sells tickets like a blood feud.
I mean, yes, in the blood feud and the home opener are good draws, but I was going to save this take for a little bit later. We can talk at the end about what this game means, the big overarching thing. But the thing that I keep coming back to is you're playing a pretty new lineup. I mean, all your middle blockers are new. You got some new outside hitters in front of their first home crowd. They've just never played in front of a home crowd in live action before. And you're making them play the blood feud game in front of the biggest attendance ever in an arena they don't usually practice in. They probably practice in there a few times this week. I'm not saying that part.
They made sure to do that, yeah.
But and we'll get into some more of this detail later. Like I said, I hadn't planned to talk about this now. But I'm going to just push back a little bit with this being the right point of the schedule. Maybe maybe they just don't go to FAMU last week and play a couple games in O'Keefe just to get the jitters out. It felt like a very jittery game. Game to me.
I agree with that part,
and I think that's reflected in our fan base because this is by far more than the Elite Eight game, volleyball game, more than softball regionals, more than anything baseball's done, more than NCAA tournaments for this team in the past in general. This is by far the most like texts and DMs and things I've gotten from anyone under the sun, friends and acquaintances, about the results of a non-rev or baseball game. Maybe even men's basketball too. ACC title. Never mind. Including the quote, "This is a calamity on all levels," from somebody who I would deem very much knows what he's talking about. And I know he listens, so shout out. You're right. And quote,
we'll get there.
We cannot afford meltdowns like this if we're going to make a tournament push. So those are my two shout outs. But I don't know. In terms of the schedule thing,
I think we can have a meltdown or two.
It's tough. It's tough in a lot of ways, and there's good, there's bad. And I think before we get into the UGA game, we'd be well served to say that they swept the other two matches this weekend. The season is not over.
No,
I don't want to get into this nitty gritty and not say
you keep jumping everywhere. We got to.
Come on, there's a schedule.
Come on.
There's a shout sheet. There's a schedule. This was going to be organized, and now you're jumping all over what I wanted to say.
We'll talk about today's game later.
Mess. It's a mess. The last note before
you guys didn't let me comment on the swimming schedule last week, so now you're paying for it. That's what I have to say.
I mean,
well, you decided to go on vacation. That's not our fault.
MetLife Stadium, man. I don't know what to tell you.
Okay, the last note before we start talking about this game in particular, we did notice one particularly tall individual in the courtside seating, and that was Patrick Ewing. His daughter is apparently a high school junior and a volleyball recruit.
Yep.
They were there.
They've been here all weekend. They went to today. Today is Sunday. They went to today's game too. So I can only imagine they had to have gone to yesterday's game as well if they just were in Atlanta all weekend. It also is Patrick Ewing.
They got them tickets to the. Wonder if they got soccer tickets in there somewhere.
Maybe.
Anyway,
I don't know.
It's an errant thought, but let's talk about this game. Let me set the stage with TLDR. This sucked. It sucked.
Purely
everything
the game.
About it.
Purely the game.
Purely the sporting side of the game.
Purely the volleyball sucked. Everything else was amazing.
Purely the sporting side of this game sucked, and it was bad. But we are going to try to find one little shining moment in the muck. Mr. Grant, give me that shining moment, if you will.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think Eloise Suarez and Smiley Manyang, they really made the most of the time that they were on the court in the UGA game, particularly Manyang. One of the few things that I think was consistently effective on the attack for a good chunk of that game, and yet she wasn't on the court all that much. I think Pearson and Mogridge, at least in terms of points contested, if that's a way to put that, I think saw more playing time there. But when she was in and when she was getting fed, that was great to see. And you know, like I said, a lot of newness in the middle blocker position. If you can have three reliable options, that's going to bode really well for these tougher ACC and NCAA tournament games down the line.
Jack, any other golden moments for you? Any nuggets from the courtside seats you were in?
It was really fun to be courtside for this match. I'll note that, like they put media down at the bottom. There was fewer media than would have otherwise been there because a lot of the Georgia Tech's media was flying to Ole Miss that day. So the sheer coverage of this game, just bad luck of the schedule, wasn't as much as I think it could have been outside of what we provide. So I think this time next year, do it again. You get everybody there. Yeah, I'll agree with Manyang. Like that was the thing I noted in my recap. It was just like we couldn't get anything stringing together. You cannot talk about this game without talking about Georgia's Laura Fisher, their main middle blocker, who's also their best offensive weapon they have. She is just a massive human, and the first middle blocker we truly just did not have an answer for all season. Like I think a lot of the reason why our attacks became far more shaky and far less confident was because we just did not have a way to get around her. I don't think D'Amico is getting assist quick enough to players to get around her. Also, like her lateral movement was so good that it did not matter what side of the net. To be honest, she knew she had. She was in the middle to start. She could cover Mogridge or Pierce. They were in the middle, and she could get around to Bertolino or Otsune or Mendez really quickly as well. So like she was covering everything we had, that made it really hard. And Penn State wasn't able to do that. USF wasn't able to do that. San Diego kind of did that today. Howard definitely didn't, and definitely no one in Tallahassee did that. So that was a new challenge, and they just simply did not adapt well enough, except for Smiley Manyang, who knew how to get around that. She had 6 kills on 7 attempts. Like she only missed once, and it wasn't even an error. Like she just hit it into a person one time, and the other 6 times it got on the ground. So, and she did the same thing today also in terms of just efficiency. So, yeah, that was huge. That was huge for me to see. Like Kalia has like a set rotation where she brings in Suarez and Manyang for a little bit each set, or maybe every other set or something like that. And in the final set, she brought in Manyang for one extra rotation. Then I think was otherwise planned because I think she saw, Otsune was just not getting stuff done. Berlin were not getting things done. We had our hitting percentage was 125 or less in the second through fourth sets, and under 100 in the second and fourth sets. So our offense was it just wasn't there. Like it just truly wasn't. I think they just got too scared of actually just smacking the ball because they were going to get stuffed, and they just couldn't get around it. So that's simply how I saw that going down. In the end, we barely. The fact we lost in 4. The fact we barely lost that second set, I think, is a huge thing here. Like, we won the first set 25-21. Like, both teams were playing pretty shaky, working out the jitters. We just came out on top. And then we had that second set. Like, we were ahead. We had set points, and we could not put it away. That was the first time all season we didn't put it away. And then we just didn't. And they capitalized on it, and the momentum was just gone by that. I think that second set was the pivot point of the whole thing.
I think this is where the take on the geometry thing kind of solidified in my head. There's a particularly notable ball that landed in that would have been out that they just kind of let go late in that set. Can't remember if it was like 23.
They had multiple serves that they were just letting Georgia's serves just drop in that they thought were going to be out. That second set, Pimentel accidentally kicked the ball that was going to fall out.
That's the one. That's what I was thinking.
I think it was landing out from my angle, and she was trying to get around, and she just didn't get. Yeah, she just didn't get her whereabouts right, and then her right leg just kicked the ball, and she was like, she knew she had messed up there. It was a mistake, but like,
it's just one of those things that I don't think we've seen that team play a game like that. And Akshay, I think we went to this game together, but the Notre Dame game in 2021. Tech went up 2-0 and then got reverse swept by Notre Dame at home. They had a monster attack. I can't remember if she was an outside hitter or middle blocker, but just one. It was Laura Fisher-ish, if you will, Jack. Just brutal. Good adjustments. And I think the Athenians made good adjustments on Friday. I mean, I think that bears true. They won the match against, Tech's still a good team. They're still a great team. They're keep playing their brand of volleyball. They will be hosting games in the NCAA tournament, and I will be there yelling my head off. UGA made good adjustments, and you got to learn from stuff like this too. I think, maybe there's not as much of a home parallel from last year, but the Louisville game at home wasn't super pretty either. The team is going to have games like this because they're not Texas and they're not Louisville.
They're not. Well, Texas ain't Texas this year either. So, it was also not a great game for Georgia either. They never got higher than 182 in their attacking. In terms of hitting percentage, they had 15-22 side out that set. And both teams, like in terms of attacks and kills, it was remarkably even. We just could not. We just let some serves drop in that just should not have dropped in at all. Georgia had 15 aces. Georgia had 9 aces to our 4, and we both had 15 service errors. Like, that kind of is where that match fell down to.
And I think that's a good segue into another point. 2 of those 4 aces came on back-to-back Bianca Bertolino serves.
Yeah.
And she was good at the line in the first, and we kept her at the line. I'm not saying she was bad at the line in the rest of the sets. Not at all. I think our problem was we didn't keep her in service and keep ourselves in rotation. And that hurt us in other phases of the match because, hey, your best server, if she's not taking those serves, and then if you're building rotation around that, like I think that kind of, that's why the rotation is important, right? That's one of the key tenets of strategy in the game, and we just couldn't capitalize on that.
I'm starting to wonder, and this take backed itself up today against San Diego a little bit. While we did win most of her service points, the ones that we didn't win, she hits her serve so hard. Now, if y'all were around in 2021 and saw Kayla Kaiser, 2020 saw Kayla Kaiser serve, she had that one where she throws it 8 feet in the air, jumps, gets all the top spin on it, and it's like a 1 in 3 shot. It's an ace, an error, or just a really hard to return or something. Berlin hasn't had the really long errors, thankfully. Hers goes short. But what happens though is if you can dig that serve, it goes so high in the air that you have so much time to reset yourself and like shape up well on the set. So today I really started wondering, like, is it actually best case scenario for her to hit a monster power serve every time if half the time the other team actually has a better chance at getting a good attack down just because the serve allows for so much airtime.
And that's the thing too, is they got better at returning it because in the first set, those serves were going back over to our side of the net, and in this third and fourth, they were able to play that. And that's another part of it.
I wonder I wonder if she adapts to that and notices, okay, there might be times where I just need to hit the changeup, or just put the changeup in there, or just put a meatball down there and just hope you can get some knuckling action, just something that isn't a topspin serve that if they see it often enough, they'll know how to take it.
Yeah, I mean, at that point, it's pitch sequencing, right?
Right.
Like, it's, but it also requires that you to pull off that kind of sequencing. It also requires that you stay on serve consistently, I think the narrative kind of rounds itself, right? They have the opportunity to do these kinds of creative things on serve, and they just don't. They didn't maintain serve in this point, and I think that was part of the frustration.
That was one of the first times we weren't that was like one of the first games we were under 50% winning service points and stuff like that. Like, it was not even close to what like we had noted last week, and me and Jake we noted last week, like they want an absurd amount of their service points and then want even more of their returning points. And this was the grand back down to the median game in that sense.
Yeah, no, it's an incredible regression to the mean. I haven't taken a look at our advanced stat sources yet today, but and I don't know if they're updated yet, but I'd like to dig into that too. I think coming back to your point about hitting a changeup and going off speed on serve, I'd actually point out that they did this a lot to both Jake and I's extreme annoyance during points as they were playing. There were opportunities where players that we know that can put a lot of pace on the ball, like Bianca Bertolino or Larissa Mendez, from the back row, can put a lot of pace on it. They just refuse.
Yeah,
and
that's where I know the Laura Fisher thing. I think they just got scared too. Like, they could have, but that just meant an easier block for them, honestly, that you couldn't salvage at the end on the other side of the net. And then the drop shots became necessary to get around her.
Yeah, maybe that's part of it. But I think when you have that moment in the air, it's not just a rocket straight ahead, right? Like, you have some sort of, obviously this is coming from someone that hasn't played and also isn't playing high level volleyball now, but so caveats and, backseat Monday morning quarterbacking here, but like, you can direct it. And I think that's something that Mariana Barbilla and Julia Bergman were really good at, is basically doing the coffin corner punt drill from Madden with hits like that. Right, where placement, where pace is important, but also placement is important.
Right.
So they have those opportunities, but they weren't taking them. They weren't, and even when they did, they weren't hitting the ball with pace, like the same pace that Bianca Bertolino was hitting those massive serves with was not something that you saw hit her returns with. And I think that's one of the differences, and I also noted, and Jake, I think we talked about this a bunch of times, is that one of the things I've learned from watching soccer a ton and being involved in that space is that if you see players do something that seems out of the norm for them or do something repeatedly that's very specific, it's most likely that they're being told to do that, right? And the frequency with which they were almost unnaturally hitting some of these drop shots and going off speed felt like this is something that they saw on film that Georgia was going to be weak to, and they kept pressing that advantage. But they kept trying to press that as a tactical advantage.
Right.
But I think at a certain level, you have, especially after two sets of seeing, okay, well, they're adapting or this isn't really working.
Yeah.
Maybe
Yeah.
you go back to the drawing board and say, okay, we need to make an adjustment. We know we have another gear. We need to take advantage of like
That's
we need to switch tactics. And again, it goes back to that idea of pitch sequencing. Don't let them see the same the same thing multiple times in a row.
right.
Switch it up, do something different.
Yeah.
And I think you also saw this with substitution patterns, right? So I want to make sure I get these related
Go
points
ahead.
in.
Yeah. Yeah.
But like you saw this with substitution patterns. Collier rode what has been a pretty consistent starting seven for much of this game. And then once it got late and it started getting into you need to do something to salvage this, otherwise you will lose. Like the late in that third set and the entirety of the fourth set, that's when it was more not necessarily rotational substitutions, but stuff like we saw late in the season last year versus your top teams like Louisville and Pitt, where it was just sort of panicking, right? Or at least to me, it felt like panicking and
Yeah.
just trying to get people into spots to try to get something going.
Patterson serving was weird to me. Lauren Sandin coming in for a little bit was weird to me. I'll talk a little bit about today's game about what the Sandin part means. On Berlio's serve, I'm looking at Husker Geek now. She actually has the fifth most aces per 100 points right now. This is through Friday. And I think she may have landed a couple. She did landed 0 today. I know that. So that number's out of date for sure at the moment, but at least that's working in a sense. She is not in the top 10 in service aces per 100 serves. Different metric there. But no, I think I agree. Like that was a thing last year too. Like it's like, okay, you get the random spot serve by Patterson. She's not a serve specialist. She's a defensive specialist. I mean, Talley will put in like if she thinks she needs more defense to like save a match, like to not prevent a point, she'll do that. But then it's like, okay, but then you're losing offense by doing that at the same time. Patterson's not going to contribute to your offense really. She may defensively help out some, but it's like, all right, where's the trade-off there? Where's that decision? Where does the ball fall on that decision line of what's going to happen more often than not? Are you going to lose that point? Are you going to gain that? I don't know.
Yeah, and I wish we were able to draw that curve, right? Like
Yeah.
and evaluate what that trade-off is like. But I think in this case it was kind of obvious is that you had multiple players on the night, multiple starters on the night that were just not at the level.
Right. Yeah. Eventually, you just
And
gotta like let
and
people
just you have
press
to
what they
do
knew.
something.
Right. Yeah.
You have to do something. And I think and I think this comes back to the way that she likes to set up her team is that she has this starting seven that she trusts a lot, and she decides that pretty early on in the season and then sticks to it. Whereas I think more experimentation in the non-con and especially early on in some of these games, like more opportunities to rotate and more opportunities to get some of these girls in and get them time and take a look at them and see what they can be in terms of depth pieces would be really useful in situations like this when you're chasing a result and know that you need to make a change. It's like
Yeah.
you know
Yeah.
what players deeper into your bench are good at and what moments they can contribute in. And I'm sure that she's seeing this in practice, and I'm sure that she's seeing this in some of the opportunities that they've had to empty the bench, but more like you need more data points. And I think they've had opportunities for more data points that they haven't taken.
This week it was big for that. Should I move on to Howard and San Diego to continue this point? Yeah, like yesterday against Howard, I wasn't able to watch it because I watched the Messiless Miami get absolutely killed. But Zoe Winford played in that game, played for, I think she had like a spot serve. And then Suarez and Mannion came in and played with the starters. For the last two sets. That game against Howard was never in doubt. Like we killed them in three sets. It was not a challenge. I'm really glad we had that particular game after the loss because they needed a reset game for sure. And I mean, Bertolino had 70. They didn't need to attack that often. They were hidden just fine. There was a lot of errors going on by Howard as well. So like they didn't have to try that hard to win this game. Honestly, their side out. They only had 11, 10, and 12 side outs in these attacks, and they had in the 20s against Georgia. Like they just didn't need to do anything to win this match at all. But of note here, Tamara Oatsene had 5 kills against Howard, which was three girls had 5, her, Bertolino, and Pierce, but she hit them at a 0.050 percentage. So sub 100, which does not do you any good, really, to win matches. And I saw that, and guess who did not play today against San Diego? That would be Miss Tamara Oatsene. Did not play a single point. And she tried something. This was the newest, like the most newest, like, what are you doing, Kali? I've never seen you do this thing before. She split that spot that's usually Oatsene, outside hitter, half the points for Lauren Sandin and half the points for Leah Harper. She started Harper, and every time it was time for their second serve in a rotation, they swapped out.
I kind of dig it.
And it kind of worked. Harper had 3 kills in the third set that were like lethal kills, like really good. Sandin was very vulnerable on serve receive though, and San Diego took advantage of that for a little bit. So that is not a permanent fix by any means. But like they played every set. Like there was 10 people that played today. All of them played every set for a considerable amount of points.
I will offer one, I guess not correction, but at least softening of my point as I have the individual statistics pulled up. So you have, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 players that have played all right around all of the sets that Tech has played this season.
Yep.
And then you have a clear second tier in that group next under that, which is that rotational piece of Manniang and Suarez. So that's good, but then everyone under, and just for context, Suarez is at 20 sets played, Manniang is at 18 sets played. So again, clear second tier, up down from 34.
Mm-hmm.
And then no one has played more than 9 or appeared in 9 sets, not played, let alone played.
There's a lot of just basically there's a lot of spot serve there for a point appearances that have happened.
Yeah.
So
and I don't have the number of points that they played, but I just have I guess the sets that they played or sets that they appeared in. And it's, I think like I will take back a little bit more of my criticism. I think this is like a work in progress in terms of the depth, but
it is.
I'm still sticking to the point of you had opportunities where you were boat racing opponents previously to build up that second tier, that second string, and not just a rotational second string, a actual useful squad. Like extend your useful squad a little bit more.
That's I had to imagine. She did that against Stetson last weekend, where basically the entire bench came out there, but it was Stetson. Like you could afford to do that. I mean, the fact that she did this against a Final Four team from last year today with Sandin and Harper is something. Now San Diego is not the San Diego of last year. They're not the San Diego of last year. They did get swept today. Like they are not the same. They did push us hard in that first set. They're a tall team. They were able to make life really difficult for us today. But they had enough mistakes, and then we went on a 9-point run to kill them in the third set. So like we got it done in the end. But at the same time, like I think Collier is seeing that you can't run just your 7-8 people all the way through. Like you have to have the 8, 9, and 10 people ready at all times. And if you can fit in reps that are valuable reps, you do that because that pays off eventually. So yeah, today did that. Like Manniang, I am not expecting, but would not be surprised to see Manniang start Wednesday at Clemson. Like she is killing it. She hit 700 today. She was 8 of 10 with 1 error today. Like she was by far our best attacker again. Now Mendez had 12 kills. 3 of them were literally the final 3 points of the game. Like she had 3 back to back to end the game, and San Diego was just done. It was garbage time. So, we were working with our best outside hitter is a freshman who just got here, like was the last to arrive to the team this year. is figuring all this out. Just had her first home games. Um, new leadership effectively with Bergman gone, so Bertolino and Otene kind of have to carry the mantle there with Pimentel, and very skilled freshmen that are finding playing time with Suarez as well. So there's a lot of different things working at the same time, and every little point we can use to just fine tune it is going to be super valuable. So, hey, we're 9-1. We did not expect to be 9-1 at this point.
I think I said that 20 minutes ago and got yelled at, and I haven't gotten too many words in edgewise.
Because that was supposed to happen now, not at the beginning.
Yeah, see, there's a process to this. We build, there's a narrative, there's a flow. But now I want to
make an overarching point before we close out. Friday's game is not the end of the world, but it's more important than a single game. And I say that because in front of a bunch of people who don't normally follow volleyball, the one team that us and people like us have been beating the drum, pay attention to them. They're good. The one team that can reliably beat the team from Athens year in and year out. Since I was born, they have only lost to this team like 5 times. That's some Georgia Tech football-ish nonsense, right? Yeah. But in reverse there, right? That we approach this sport the same way and are seen relative in this rivalry the same way that normie only football fans perceive clean old-fashioned hate in football. And in front of Georgia Tech's largest crowd ever, perhaps their most hyped regular season game ever. I don't think that's too far of a stretch to say that. They laid an egg in front of a bunch of very impressionable people, and in front of people that care, they also laid an egg, right? It's something that you like, yeah, if they go beat Pitt or Louisville, we all know and would appreciate, and the listeners of this podcast, for as long as you have been listening, will know that those are big, big deals and they mean a lot. If we were to go and win 1, 2, 3, or 4 of those games, if we were to go to win the ACC, that is something that conveys it. But like outside of going to win the ACC or making a Final Four or something, this is that. And it stinks to fumble the bag, you know? And I think that's what I come back to. It's not unrecoverable. Not for this team, not for their popularity, not for their trajectory, not for recruiting, nothing. It changes nothing about that. It doesn't even put us any games further back in the conference. Conference play hasn't started yet. But man, it just feels like a missed opportunity. And that's what I hang my hat on. And that's what I kind of feel about the football game too, right? Everyone kind of penciled that one in as a loss too at the beginning of the year. If you're being honest, you know, like that's just kind of how it goes. And neither are irrecoverable, but man, it's just been a tough weekend of so close, but
yeah, I agree. We're not gonna automatically be in first place in everything. So it takes the time, and this was not progress all weekend. So the steps were made. And today my thought was, okay, if they're gonna have the ability to play in McCamish, and I think they could draw great crowds if they had 4 games there still. Like, that's absolutely doable. Play all the Friday conference games in McCamish and then play the Sunday games in O'Keefe. Because the 1 o'clock games are going to be harder to get to.
Oh, yeah.
Friday nights, absolutely doable. Absolutely doable. And then you get playing time in both. And you get more money. We need money.
The thing is, I don't necessarily, like, maybe I'm being a lot bit cynical, but I don't agree with that. Like, I think I go back to my point of, I think my point of nothing sells tickets like a blood feud stands here. Nothing sells tickets like a blood feud. The reason that people came, beyond the fact that this team is good and they hyped it and it was a home opener, but the reason that people came to this game was clean old fashioned hate and driving that, you know, interstate rivalry and wanting to be a part of the first one of the year. And I think it's difficult.
Anecdotally, at least for me, granted, I mean, like, my whole family doesn't like Georgia because my dad went to Auburn and my mom didn't go to a Southeastern school, and then me and my brother both went to Tech. So, like, we have no reason to root for them for any reason. But, like, other friends of mine who, like, would never go to a Georgia Tech sporting event for any reason at all were, like, told me we're going to this game because we want to see Georgia Tech volleyball and there's a lot of tickets, and there's tickets available for this game. And it's a big, and like they knew it was a big deal because of Georgia Tech, not because of Georgia. So I don't think you're entirely wrong here in that, like, yes, absolutely, Blood Feud does sell. That's always going to be the case. We should play this game in McCamish all the time if we can, because it'll be a crowd.
It's somewhere in the middle, though, and I think that's my tact on a lot of the reads from the night. We didn't look good in certain phases. Some of the substitutions were panicky, yes, but not like, oh my gosh, the world's ending coaching or things like that. And in the same way with the schedule, play Pitt there, play Louisville there, play them on Friday nights, play the homecoming Friday night game there. You can seize on specific opportunities. You can seize on specific opportunities to play them more and expand access and get the good teams or the ones with some zizz to them into McCamish. I think you lose a lot in terms of atmosphere by going there. I don't think that they've really ironed out the band versus audio thing in the same way that Jeff Collins kind of bungled that in 2019. They're still figuring that out with the volleyball in O'Keefe versus McCamish. Again, I think it's somewhere in the middle. The same way I said about narratives, the same way I said about gameplay. I'm not letting them off the hook for losing entirely, but it's not going to wreck the season. I don't think we should put every Friday night game in McCamish. O'Keefe means a lot to this team and a lot to the energy, and it is a noticeable. It's different, right? It's not worse. It's just different. But as always, I think there's a middle ground. I think we've gone on this for quite a long time. And
I have news.
Yeah,
Louisville lost today. They're going to lose to Stanford.
Who's they
ranked ahead of us?
Oh, they played.
But that's an upset. That was a 5-set upset today. That Stanford beat them 3-2. Number 5 ranked.
I saw Wisconsin and Florida were in the 5th set when I was reading
Wisconsin won that 3-2 in the 5th set. Kentucky and Nebraska are playing right now. That's a ranked on ranked. So
what a shame for Louisville to take their first conference loss of the year.
I think the way we approach the rest of the season is you just got to go approach each week and try and go 2-0. Like at the end of the day, that's what it is. It's a good team that played bad on Friday. Like that's just kind of what it is, right?
We have 4 extremely winnable games coming up. Only one of them's at home, sadly, but regardless, like this is absolutely a stretch where we can string together some wins. We lose one, okay, that's fine. Everyone in the top 10 loses eventually for the most part. Texas last year was an exception. So 1 or 2 here.
Lost a dud to K-State.
You might be right. They may have had one loss.
Maybe that was the year before.
Either way, like this is like baseball. A few here and there doesn't end your season whatsoever. And people know this is a high strung game. Georgia was ranked before the season started too. Like they're not a bad team. People know that was not exactly a bad. Like it wasn't like if we lost to Howard, there'd be questions. Losing to Georgia, that's just we had a bad night against a team who can take advantage against that.
And a historically pretty good South Carolina team lost to Winthrop yesterday. So
wow. Okay.
And there's another one too that I noticed just watching scroll stats pop up on the screen. All that to say, the ACC is not doomed because Louisville lost, and we are not doomed because we lost Friday. But narratives certainly have their effect. Akshay, I'm taking over this segue. It's time to taste what's going on the rest of the ACC this weekend. We've talked about volleyball long enough, and I want to say there's some interesting matchups, at least in terms of the oddball conference variety coming up this week.
That there is. Let's go through them, shall we? Let's start at the top on a Friday at 7:30 p.m. on ESPN. NC State versus Virginia. Mr. Purdy, give me a quick take on this.
Virginia could not lose by enough. 9.5's the line. I mean, you could have told me that was 20.5, and I would have believed that. It's Virginia, man. Like, come on.
Yeah, I think you're pretty spot on with that one.
Yeah.
Florida State and Clemson at noon on ABC on Saturday. Florida State is a 1.5 point away favorite. Mr. Grant, what say ye?
Yeah, I think Clemson acquitted themselves a little bit on Saturday. But that said, I think Florida State de-acquitted themselves. So I really don't. Yes. I don't know a ton of what to think about this. I think it'll make for good television, though. That is for sure. As for the line, I probably wouldn't touch that. This game in Death Valley, Clemson's pretty good there. Florida State seems like a good team. I don't know. Should make for good TV, though, at the very least.
Syracuse hosts Army hosts the Troops and is a 13-point favorite at home at noon on the ACC network. Mr. Purdy, what say ye about the champions of last week's Sicko's Game of the Week?
Army won that game, right? Or no, sorry, Cuse won that game. Yeah.
I think so.
Talking about Purdue versus Cuse. They played a different black and gold team last week.
That's right. I'm gonna go with Cuse. The military academies have not impressed me this year in the football state of things.
Marshall is up next for Virginia Tech. It is also a sizable home favorite at noon on ESPN2, Mr. Grant.
Yeah, Virginia Tech looked bad. This is kind of an interesting, FBS versus FBS now, local action going on there. I think from a just scheduling perspective, it's very interesting. Also very interesting that they're on the road at Marshall. But gosh, I think this Virginia Tech thing, I don't know. Maybe this is my exposure to Virginia Tech coming via a podcast we all know and love, but with the Virginia Tech co-host, that was a little high on the team. This is not what I thought we were going to be seeing this year. So might avoid that one too, but it at least is an interesting concept for a matchup.
In a very early preseason basketball game, Duke faces Connecticut with a Duke as a 22-point favorite, ? 3:30 CBS Sports Network, Mr. Purdy?
That is the 18th ranked Duke Blue Devils to you. Yeah, they're good. I'm glad we don't play them this year. Good for them.
History be damned, apparently. Miami at Temple. Miami is a 25.5-point favorite, 3:30 on ESPN2, Mr. Grant.
Yeah, I don't know what it is with ACC teams visiting Temple. I don't think we'll ever get a return visit from them down in Atlanta, as far as I know. But yeah, Miami's, I'd say, still got some stuff to prove, but I don't know that Temple is too good this year either. So I'd be comfortably in the Miami camp with this, even with quite a large line.
Boston College heads to Louisville in the battle of ACC expansion from the early 10s. Louisville is just about under a 14-point favorite at home, 3:30 ACC Network. Mr. Purdy, you have the call.
This is a weirdly interesting game now because Louisville received votes this week. They received a vote this week, but they didn't look like super terrible for some of that game. And then Boston College was weirdly good against Florida State, who still got a number one vote this week too. So it could be this has anything from being Boston College sucks again to Louisville now sucks to it's a great. I don't know what's going to happen. And Louisville's a 13.5-point favorite, which does not square with me at all after what Boston College did. So I would take the Louisville win within the spread.
We've talked about Tech at Wake this weekend. Wake is a 6.5-point home favorite. That will be 6:30 p.m. on the CW. UNC goes up to Pittsburgh. UNC is a 7-point away favorite, 8 p.m. ACC Network. Mr. Grant, finish us off.
Yeah, I think UNC is pretty good. I think they got to find enough offense, and I'm not convinced Pitt is any good. UNC -7, even on the road, is pretty comfortable for me.
Gentlemen, my Sickos pick of the week is always the official Sickos committee, Sickos game of the week. But I'd like to hear yours, starting with Mr. Purdy.
This week, there is a conference game that has never happened before, with records we never thought would happen if you put these two teams together in a conference. That is Kansas and BYU playing a Big 12 game where they are both undefeated at 3-0. This never should have been a sentence I had to say, but here it is, and this is a real sentence that exists. So, in just terms of like, what the heck is this game? Why? Why is why I have this game in this category.
Big weekend for Big 12 legends like Zach Wilson, too.
Mm-hmm.
Jake, what do you have for me?
Retroactive Big 12 legend Zach Wilson. No, I generally try to avoid ACC games. The Marshall VT one was very tempting, though. And I try to avoid games involving ranked teams. This one, Sam Houston at Houston, who are I believe 0-2 and 1-2, like respectively. They're both named after the same dude, though Houston the university in Houston is indirect, but they all trace their lineage back to Sam himself. So that's a little odd. I don't know if they've ever played. I didn't do that much research into it, but they both seem kind of bad, and they're both named after the same guy, and I don't think that happens all too often. And don't tell me that like Washington State counts, because no, it doesn't. It's not the same. It's not the same.
Also, not a conference game anymore, so it really doesn't count.
Oof.
Womp womp. I think that is it for all of our scheduled content for the week. Mr. Grant, bring on trivia.
Yes, this one is short, and I was gonna tease it earlier, but instead I'll just say it now. Gents, in our Slack about a week ago, I put in the chat. I've figured out my next trivia question. Well, this is my first opportunity to ask it. It involves, well, in a way, roads. And the question is, Howell Mill Road in Atlanta, for those who don't know, shares a very particular distinction with Atlanta's most famous street of Peachtree. What is it?
They are parallel going northward.
Nah, not good enough.
Mm.
You can phone a friend or ask for a hint.
I couldn't tell you. I could not tell you. I'm just looking at them in my mental map in my head, but I do not know what the heck to think here at all.
I'm not going to dox you in terms of saying an example that might get the brains flowing, but in Atlanta, addresses are numbered with a particular suffix, right? Northeast, northwest, southeast, southwest. Does that help?
Howell Mill. I mean, there's a Peachtree Street. There's a Peachtree Street northeast. There's a Peachtree Street. There's not a northeast.
Nope. And in fact, that's the answer, if you will. Howell Mill and Peachtree are among the rare Atlanta streets to be directionless. They are not Howell. It's not Howell Mill Northwest.
That's right. Yeah.
It's not Peachtree Street Northeast, Northwest, Southeast, Southwest. They are just Peach. There is a West Peachtree, but Peachtree Street is just Peachtree Street.
I guess Ponce doesn't count because it goes into a different county and everything like that. It's not really an Atlanta
actually
road.
Interesting enough. There are other roads that do fit into this bucket as well, but the countiness isn't part of it.
Okay.
Ponce, I believe, is northeast. Peachtree, I assume, is because it's the northeast northwest dividing line. But Marietta Street also falls into this bucket. Long swaths of, I think, Ivan Allen slash Joseph Boone. What's the David Abernathy? Or maybe that's that's University. Sorry. Oh wait, no, it's both of them.
Lucky
Abernathy.
Street?
What's up?
Lucky Street.
Lucky Street. There might be a chunk of it that isn't. I'm literally doing this off of a map that I have put together.
I think Lucky Street is divided because I've seen Lucky Street Northwest.
You're right. Okay, you're right.
Atlantic is also directionless. A chunk of state and a chunk of 17th are as well. It's interesting. There's not really a rhyme or reason to it.
It's just
all the
how it
interstates
works.
are also directionless, but at least in the Atlanta consideration of it. But yeah, I don't know. Odd.
Lovely.
Mr. Grant, if you will, take us on the road out of here for this week.
Yes, as always, thanks for sticking with us. It's a long episode. You can find us and our written content at fromtherumbleseat.com. You can email us at fromtherumbleseat@gmail.com. You can find us on Twitter at FTRSblog. I'm at Jake Grant98. Jack is at Jack Nicholas. You can find Section 103 there as well at Section 103, section103.com. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube at From the Rumble Seat. And as always, podcasts, wherever fine podcasts are distributed. As always, tell your friends, rate, review. We appreciate the word of mouth. And that is, as always, the most powerful way to tell something to someone about something you like. So feel free to do that as well. In the meantime, till we speak next week, good night, good luck, and go Jackets.